The fire raged uncontrollably, consuming the house in its fierce, orange glow. Neighbors stood frozen on the sidewalk, their gasps drowned out by the crackling of the flames and the wail of distant sirens. Amid the chaos, a desperate mother screamed for help, her voice cutting through the noise as she begged for someone to save her child still trapped inside. The boy's silhouette appeared briefly at the window, his small frame illuminated by the raging inferno behind him. Time was running out, and every second felt like an eternity. When the fire truck finally pulled up, hope flickered for a moment. The mother pleaded with the firefighters, pointing to the boy on the second floor. But then something unexpected happened. The firefighters hesitated, exchanging glances as if unsure of what to do next. Instead of rushing into action, they stayed back, muttering among themselves. The mother's pleas grew louder, her desperation turning into disbelief. Why weren't they moving? What could possibly justify their inaction at such a critical moment? The crowd, stunned by the hesitation, began to murmur. Some tried to intervene, shouting at the firefighters to do their job, while others filmed the scene on their phones. Tensions were rising as the boy's faint cries for help echoed from the window. The mother fell to her knees, her hands clasped in prayer, as if sheer hope could change the unthinkable. What followed next would leave everyone present utterly shocked, a turn of events no one could have anticipated. This moment of hesitation would unravel a story far deeper than anyone could have imagined, exposing hidden motives and challenging the very core of what it means to act in the face of danger. The truth, when it came to light, would leave the world speechless. The flames grew fiercer with every passing second, licking at the edges of the roof as smoke billowed high into the sky. The boy's cries from the second-story window grew weaker, barely audible over the chaos. The crowd watching couldn't understand what was happening. The firefighters, trained to run toward danger, stood frozen on the lawn, exchanging uneasy looks. The mother's cries pierced the tension as she screamed, "Please, that's my son, you have to help him." Among the bystanders, some began to speculate. Maybe it's too dangerous for them to go in, one neighbor suggested hesitantly, though their voice wavered with doubt. Others weren't so forgiving. They're firefighters, it's their job. A man shouted angrily, gesturing toward the burning house. A few brave souls edged closer to the firefighters, urging them to act. Still, the team remained unmoving, their hesitation casting a shadow of doubt over their intentions. The mother's desperation turned into anger. She pleaded directly with the fire chief, her voice trembling as she demanded an explanation. The chief looked down, avoiding her gaze, and mumbled something about waiting for backup. But it was clear that the boy didn't have time for backup. His face appeared once more at the window, a faint plea for help etched in his frightened expression. At that moment, a young man from the crowd stepped forward, stripping off his jacket. His face was resolute, and his voice carried a quiet determination as he said, "If you won't do it, I will." Gasps rippled through the crowd as the man approached the house, heat and smoke radiating outward like a wall. The firefighters shouted at him to stop, but their warnings were half-hearted and hollow. What drove the firefighters to hesitate? What was holding them back when every second mattered? As the tension mounted, the crowd was left wondering whether the boy would survive, and what deeper truth might explain this unthinkable delay. The young man, undeterred by the scorching heat, pushed forward, shielding his face with his arm as he edged closer to the house. The flames rolled louder, as though daring him to proceed. The crowd watched in stunned silence, their eyes darting between him and the firefighters who continued to stand motionless. The mother's voice broke through the heavy tension once more, begging the stranger to save her son, her words filled with both gratitude and desperation. Inside the house, the boy's small figure was barely visible through the thick, black smoke. He clung to the windowsill, coughing and crying as the fire crept closer. The young man stopped at the edge of the porch, glancing back briefly as if to gather the strength needed for what lay ahead. His face was resolute, and without hesitation, he disappeared into the smoke-filled doorway. The crowd erupted in shouts, some cheering him on while others pleaded for him to turn back. The tension was unbearable, the uncertainty of what would happen next keeping everyone on edge. The firefighters exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort growing as the crowd's murmurs turned into accusations. "Why aren't they doing anything?" a woman shouted, her voice trembling with outrage. The mother's gaze bore into the fire chief, her tear-streaked face a mixture of fury and heartbreak. But the chief remained silent, his jaw clenched as if weighed down by some invisible force. Inside, the young man navigated through the suffocating smoke, calling out for the boy. His voice cracked as he coughed, but he pressed on, driven by the thought of the child's terrified cries. Outside, the house groaned under the fire's relentless assault, the structure threatening to collapse at any moment. The crowd held its collective breath, their eyes fixed on the burning building. Each passing second felt like an eternity, and the question loomed larger than ever. Would he make it out in time? Or would the truth behind the firefighters' hesitation come to light too late? The crowd gasped as the flames surged higher, licking at the roof and sending fiery debris cascading to the ground. Every second felt heavier than the last as the mother knelt on the grass, her hands clasped in prayer. The firefighters remained frozen, their eyes fixed on the house, but their bodies refusing to move. Suddenly, a faint sound broke through the chaos, a voice, hoarse but determined, calling out from inside. The young man had found the boy. Moments later, the crowd caught a glimpse of them. The young man was at the top of the staircase, cradling the boy in his arms. He looked down, his face illuminated by the flickering firelight, and took a deep breath before making his descent. But just as he began to move, the floor beneath him groaned loudly. The crowd screamed in horror as part of the staircase gave way, sending sparks flying. Miraculously, the young man caught himself on the remaining steps, clutching the boy tightly to his chest. The stakes were higher than ever, and every movement was a gamble. Then came an unexpected twist that stunned everyone. A voice from the crowd shouted, "I know him." Heads turned as an older man stepped forward, his face etched with recognition. "That's Mark Taylor." The name rippled through the onlookers, their expressions shifting from confusion to astonishment. Mark Taylor was a firefighter himself, a highly decorated one who had disappeared from the force under mysterious circumstances years ago. The realization sent a shockwave through the crowd. Why would a former hero risk his life while the current team stood by, refusing to act? The fire chief's face paled as the murmurs grew louder. The crowd began to piece together the story, their anger and confusion bubbling to the surface. Inside the house, Mark fought against the smoke and flames, unaware of the revelation happening outside. The tension reached a fever pitch, the weight of the unanswered questions pressing down on everyone. Why had the firefighters hesitated? And what connection did the chief have to the man risking everything to save a life? As the house continued to crumble under the weight of the inferno, Mark pressed forward, each step a fight against the thick smoke and unbearable heat. The boy clung tightly to him, his small arms wrapped around Mark's neck. From the crowd, the mother's cries grew louder, her eyes glued to the broken staircase. Just as it seemed all hope was lost, Mark emerged from the flames, his silhouette barely visible through the smoke. The onlookers erupted in cheers, their collective relief washing over the tense scene. Then came the moment no one expected. A journalist in the crowd recognized Mark and shouted, "He's the man who exposed the corruption in the department years ago." The crowd turned their attention to the fire chief, whose face had gone pale. Whispers spread like wildfire, connecting the dots. Mark had been forced out of the department after uncovering a scandal involving negligence and discrimination. The firefighters' inaction wasn't just hesitation. It was a deliberate refusal to help, rooted in the lingering resentment they harbored against him. The revelation sent shockwaves through the crowd. The fire chief stammered, trying to explain, but the damage was done. Cameras captured every moment as Mark, still recovering, stood tall. "I didn't come back for them," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "I came back because it's my duty to save lives, no matter what." The final twist left the crowd in stunned silence. The truth was out, and while the fire chief and his team faced the weight of their actions, Mark's bravery and integrity shone brighter than the flames he had just escaped.